Jack Jacobs, these have been U.S. allies. They have gone into the fight and suffered, as we said, just grievous casualties. What does this say about what we always proudly regard as the strength of that American handshake, that American commitment around the world at a time when there are so many forces trying to tear down the cross-Atlantic alliance?
Well, the first thing is that the reason that ISIS was on the run was because of the Kurds and our support of the Kurds and their support of our objectives in the region. What this does is completely change the equation about how people think about our commitments, not just in the region, but elsewhere. So now the commitment that we make, whatever it happens to be, will be taken with a grain of salt by allies, by friends, and by enemies, too. Whatever we say we're going to do, everybody will be convinced that we are not going to do. And as a matter of fact, it becomes really important when you consider that what we want to accomplish there is in our national interest. So the perception around the world, not just in the Middle East, is now that the United States is not even willing to pursue its own objectives anywhere.
As someone who fought and damn near died for his country, when you hear the president say they weren't with us on Omaha Beach, you and I were joking about it in my office earlier tonight. How does that really strike you?
Well, two things. The first is it results in the kind of decision-making that we see that's inimical to our own interests. But it also demonstrates an almost painful ignorance of how things actually work and how things have worked. And I think that's going to contribute in a major way to the kind of understanding I just talked about. Nobody is going to be anywhere is going to be convinced that we have any idea what we're doing. And that's very, very dangerous indeed.
Tom, a two-part question for you, and you will get the last word. How can this ever be set right? Is it reparable? And is there any winner in this situation at all?
Not for the Kurds who are going to fight and die now, it can't be set right. And one of the things that concerns me, I think Colonel Jacobs is absolutely right, that people overseas are now going to doubt our word because they're not going to make a distinction between Donald Trump and the Americans. As far as people overseas are concerned, this is the United States. The president is the personification of the United States, and this is something that we have done as a country. As for who's a winner, there's only... I mean, the Turks got what they wanted. Erdogan, I shouldn't even say the Turks. Erdogan got what he wanted. And the Russians are a winner no matter how this plays out. The Russians can sit back, really, and just let the damage unroll, while the Americans are shown to be an inconstant ally and friend. And if we do try to oppose the Turks on this, now we have a problem inside of NATO, which, of course, is Putin's fondest wish is to see NATO fall apart. And he doesn't really have to lift a finger to make it fall apart. The president's doing his work for him.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.